Another style that arose around the First World War was the Futurist style in Italy. It was a particular movement that really celebrated a lot of things that are not typically celebrated in art, and those included violence, chaos, war, masculinity, modernism, and they were very much in line with Mussolini's rising fascism at this time. So there are a lot of hard edges. There's a lot of celebration of modernity and pushing away from the sort of traditional image of Italy as being a pasta loving, happy, relaxed people. So there are images like this one on the right by Umberto Boccioni, unique forms of continuity in space that are hard lined, geometric, abstracted, um, and not necessarily uh, indicative of things that we typically associate with Italy. Then there are images like the picture by Gino Savarini, Dynamic Hieroglyphic of the Bel Tabaran, which is a sort of German interpretation um, of what's happening in Italy at this time. So you see these sort of almost cubist style images that are coming out of it, but they have color, they have multiple perspectives, very different from the sort of cubist images of Braque and Picasso, but they have that same sort of harsh quality that Umberto Boccioni's image has. Of the in between the wars periods, the second major style is Surrealism. And there are quite a few artists associated with Surrealism, not just um, painters or sculptors, but also writers, poets. It's a very universal style that happens around this time. So Andre Breton writes what's called the Surrealist Manifesto, and then it sort of disseminates into a lot of different particular artists. In general, Surrealism taps into the subconscious or dream imagery, and it creates a sort of hyper reality that can be off putting because it's just a little bit off from what reality looks like, but it's usually marked by a highly realistic style of painting. So, for example, this image here by Salvador Dali, soft construction of boiled beans, premonition of civil war, is a reference to the coming civil war in Spain that we've already talked about a little bit with Guernica. We have the sort of Spanish desert from the part of Spain where Dali grew up. And then we have these sort of disembodied human body parts. We have this sort of very strange body formed into a square. It is bizarre, unusual. We know that Dali used something called the paranoid critical method, where he would put himself into this almost trance-like state. And then when he would get the images, he would immediately pull himself out of them, write them down so he could paint them. It is unusual, it's unsettling, and pretty typical of most surrealist painters. In this particular slide, you're looking at three different versions of the Temptation of St. Anthony, actually one of which is in the LaSalle Art Museum, so when you were down there, perhaps you saw it. The Temptation of St. Anthony by Dorothea Tanning, which is on the left there. She participated in a particular competition where surrealists were asked to paint an image of St. Anthony's Temptation, and the best one was picked for a prize. Now, Dorothea Tanning did not win. The winner is the one on the bottom right there by Dali, and on the top you can see another image by Max Ernst, another version of the same thing. But all three of these sort of demonstrate the different interpretations of surrealism. So Tanning's image, we have this kind of tortured St. Anthony who is being assaulted by these sort of feminine demons. So you can see a female-shaped demon at the bottom, on the far left. In his clothing, we see these sort of female forms swirling around him, and this kind of demon grabbing his arm down here. And again, this kind of interesting dream-like landscape that is pretty typical of most surrealist images. In Ernst's image here, we have St. Anthony being sort of overwhelmed by these monstrous creatures. There is, again, kind of a female monster in the background there. But Ernst is really big on these sort of very colorful, almost Bosch-style monsters that sort of overwhelm the canvas. And then finally we have Dali's at the bottom. We see St. Anthony alone, naked in the desert, holding a cross against this barrage of temptations that are coming at him across the Spanish desert. And they're all on these very long stilt legs. Again, a female figure. This is very a prominent interpretation with the surrealists, is that the feminine wiles are a temptation, which is interesting, I think, in particular from Tanning, because as one of the few women in the surrealist movement, for her to kind of go with that is a fascinating perspective. Surrealists last for a while, and there are iterations of it that move outside of mainland Europe and into the United States. But I would say by the Second World War, it is kind of dying out at that point. One artist I just wanted to draw your attention to, who's a little outside the norm, is René Magritte. He, in particular, paints images that look almost entirely realistic, but there is just this tiny little thing that will tell you that it's surreal and not a real image. So this is actually one of his most famous pieces, The Treachery of Images. So on it we see a picture of a pipe, and underneath it says, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe," or "This is not a pipe." And the challenge of the image is that your mind tells you it's a pipe. The mind wants to interpret and understand what it's seeing, but you're being told by the artist that what you're seeing is not a pipe. And what he really means is, you can't pick up this pipe, you can't hold it, you can't use it as you would an actual pipe. So it is not a pipe, it's a picture of a pipe. But it talks about kind of the distinction between a word and the object itself. So the first truly American style of modern art is abstract expressionism. And it picks up some of the expressive elements of Fauvism and German expressionism, but for the first time, it is truly 100% abstracting the canvas. It is as far removed from figurative representation as you can possibly go. And one of the leaders of the style is Jackson Pollock. So here you're looking at one of his pieces called Autumn Rhythm, number 30. There is no rhyme or reason to this image. There is no beginning, there's no end. He would actually put the canvas on the floor, which was a totally revolutionary process. No one had done that before. He would walk around it, he would step in it. A lot of his paintings will have cigarette butts or dirt or glass or whatever he was painting around, which would get on the canvas, and he would leave it. And he believed very much that a painting had its own life, and he would just know when he was finished with the canvas.